And this level of trust has had mixed results. There are times when certain women have basically lied to men that they're on birth control. There are women who have gotten themselves off of birth control while they're with men so they can get pregnant for those men. And it's not like the whole trust factor has always been at its highest whenever a woman says that she's on birth control. But men have kind of learned to adapt to the fact that
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who might find it hard to breathe if you've got that asthma. He's also a man who usually includes running his mouth to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B, and I am here to talk about men. And I know it sounds like I'm just focusing on the gender that women sometimes have a problem with. But no, this entire episode involves women. And also involves children, interestingly enough. But in all of these cases, men do kind of stand central because for some reason, it seems like there are some changes that are happening to men or might happen to men that may be driving people up the wall, be it women, be it people that are looking towards the unity with women, and things like that might actually raise some sort of alarm that men are supposed to look at or look into. But in this case, I actually want to question whether us not doing anything might actually be a good thing or a bad thing. And the hope is that you'll agree with me, but in case you don't agree with me, in case you do, in case you have a different form of feedback, or should you want to suggest a potential topic or guest that I should have on the podcast, then you can always hit me up on the social media. The links are always in the description. They rarely ever change. The DMs are always open, so you can always hit me up and I would be more than happy to have a look at your DMs and handle them accordingly. But all in all, I do thank you very much for listening, and I hope you listen all the way till the end. And considering that I have given the pleasantries, I feel like I should definitely get into the meat of the mix. Although before I get into the main topic, I first want to start by discussing the topic of birth control. Now, birth control for a particularly long time has been a mainly female-focused affair, whereby people find some way of, preventing women from having children. And considering that it's a case of women having children, a lot of the focus has been on women. Up until not too long ago, when a couple of different scientists started looking into the idea of male birth control and men being the ones who are taking birth control. Because for the most part, the idea of male birth control has mainly been the only two options, which are the condom, which has a, I think, 99.9% success rate, but can also burst, or getting a vasectomy, of which even after that vasectomy is done, you still have to give it some time so you can clear the pipes of whatever sperm is there. So essentially, most guys have kind of had those two options. But not too long ago, a company called Contraline recently came out with two options of male birth control that are supposedly expected to at least increase the chances of men, controlling whether they get to have kids or not. And that was through something that they refer to as a hydrogel and also an applicable lotion. Now, I do have a clip of them talking about the products that they're trying and the fact that they have actually gone past animal testing. So I'm just going to let the clip play, then give my thoughts on it. So without further ado,
this is the future of birth control. This is the Atom Hydrogel, and this is an implant that goes in the vas deferens to block sperm. It's non-hormonal, lasts for a couple years, and fully reversible.
Contraline's not stopping there. Their second product is Nesty, a gel for men that's applied daily. And what does it do?
It stops the sperm from being produced. So within a month or two of applying this, basically the guy has zero sperm. And then when you want to have children again, stop using it.
It's literally dry already.
Done. That is the entire process. Imagine wake up in the morning, take a shower, brush your teeth, put on deodorant, put this on, you're good. We at Contraline are building the future of male contraception and building a portfolio of products.
I invested about 3 years ago when Atom was still in animal testing. Today, they're raising from top biotech VCs to bring both Atom and Nesty to approval.
Okay. that is particularly interesting when you kind of think about it. The idea that men can basically get a gel or have, a blocker on, the pipe that usually sends the sperms up to, the dick and everything. Like, it actually does sound pretty nice and pretty impressive and fairly simple, even though I know this is something that they've probably worked on for years and years. And I'm not gonna lie, like when I saw this video, two main things stood out for me. The first one is what it could mean for men and the fact that men can now practice birth control in a different way that, they'd probably be comfortable with. And I will kind of talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but the second one was just how women were reacting at the idea of male birth control and how supposedly simple it is. Like, if you looked at the comments to this video, a ton of them was women just complaining about how they get a device planted in their cervix and men are getting a lotion, or women have been enduring side effects of birth control and men suddenly get one that has little to no side effects. What kind of shit is that? Or why is it that women had to suffer with birth control but men get to have it easy? Like, I saw a bunch of that which just felt like women just spewing a bunch of bile on the fact that men are getting a better form of birth control, which would have been interesting because I feel like if this was something that was happening with a swap of the genders, most guys would just be like, yo, finally I don't have to go through a bunch of shit. Like, I feel like that's how people should have been responding. And that was the first way in which I saw women responding in the comments of this particular video that was posted up on IG. And for the most part, I was like, I find it interesting that the gender that complained about birth control not being all that great on them and the fact that hormonal birth control actually does affect them internally and can really mess them up is the same one that are complaining when that burden is being taken away from them. But now, the part that also did interest me was the second batch of comments that I saw from women who weren't praising this, and they were busy talking about, oh, and you expect us to trust a man to actually use this, or imagine relying your life and future on a man putting on some gel daily, or imagine all women have to do is trust men to use it. And the interesting part about this is, like, these women are all basically making these comments, and I'm like, what the fuck do you think men have been doing since time immemorial, or at least since the pill and birth control basically came out? The birth control that women use, for the most part, is internal, not unless if they're using a female condom. So whenever they tell us that they have an IUD, or they are on an implant or some shit of the sort, or they are on like the pill or some shit, or at least you believe that this babe is on contraception. So if you're raw dogging it, you're raw dogging it. But the truth of it is, you're basically trusting that the babe is telling you the truth and nothing will go wrong, and then she ends up pregnant. And this level of trust has had mixed results. There are times when certain women have basically lied to men that they're on birth control. There are women who have gotten themselves off of birth control while they're with men so they can get pregnant for those men. And it's not like the whole trust factor has always been at its highest whenever a woman says that she's on birth control. But men have kind of learned to adapt to the fact that, you can't entirely trust it. You just hope that she's saying the truth and you cross your fingers. But now, y'all are gonna experience this, or, it's expected that women are going to experience this, and they're already questioning the trust element as if they haven't been misusing our trust for a long time. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of today's women have made it seem as though men have it easy, and they probably would do a hell of a lot better if they were men. So, this is your chance to basically feel like the men that some of y'all talk so much shit about. So, check and see how much better or worse it is from our end. But anyways, with that said, I did mention the part about how much better it might actually be for us men from the birth control side of things, because when you look at it, men haven't had a lot of control on, the final results of reproduction for a very long time. So, the condoms have been there, vasectomies have been there, but those have been like only 2 options. Women have had like 30. And with a condom, if it bursts and the babe gets pregnant, she can decide whether she wants to keep the kid or not. You can't do shit. if the babe lies to you that she's on birth control and you do it and she gets pregnant, well, you can't do shit. So essentially what I'm saying is, as men, we've had the short end of the stick for quite a while because we cannot control, the whole if she gets pregnant, what we're going to do. That one's entirely on the women. And anytime men have tried to bring up some version of that debate, at least as far as recently is concerned, women usually say that, you are not in the position to be speaking about women's bodies. So I feel like this will be a massive plus for us as guys. So if a guy does want to have kids, he can decide to not use it. If a guy wants to hold off on having kids for a bit, he doesn't necessarily have to hope that, whatever it is that happens, after a vasectomy shouldn't affect his ability to have kids. And, if it goes raw with a babe, he can still end up not getting her pregnant. So I feel like this is good. I feel like this is a positive thing for men. If you do feel some type of way about this and you're a babe, well, sucks to be you. Either way, I hope that this thing actually does go into full production and can be sold over the counter so that more men can be responsible at least as much as they want to. But with that said, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, there's this thing that some people have started complaining about, and it is the idea that there are a lot of millennial men that for some reason just don't seem to want to get married. Now, normally I'd call this BS and I'd be like, this probably isn't true, except that I've met quite a number of men who have opted to not get married and just, choose to have a kid with either a woman or a couple of women, or they just swear off marrying completely and they're like, they feel like they're much better off when they're single, especially if they don't even want kids. And this has been something that a lot of the older folk, a lot of the people from past generations have actually been complaining about. So I figured, considering that I did stumble across a Reddit post on this exact issue, that I would probably discuss it. So the post was titled, "There's a pandemic of single men slowly hitting 30s and 40s and still unmarried. What's going on?" So I am going to read the post itself. So it says, and I quote, "I've seen this post somewhere. So this morning it got me wondering, why is that reality or fact bothering people? Why are people bothered by unmarried men and women? It's the new normal and our society is crashing out like crazy. The nonsense they call the moral fabric of society or of the family, they're feeling like it's being threatened. Can old people born between 1900 to 1980 leave the rest of us alone?" End quote. Okay, now I'm gonna be very honest. I feel like this is a topic, even before I get into it, I feel like this is a topic that I am a little ill-experienced and as such ill-equipped to face to some degree, considering that I am a particularly young guy and I've never been married before. But, considering that this is something that, we should definitely look into as far as being men is concerned, you know what? I will dip my feet in this one. I'll kind of try to look at why, and hopefully, maybe in the DM someone will tell me if I'm right or wrong, but also it could actually give us something to think about. Now, normally I wouldn't mind getting into my thoughts on the entire thing, but before I can do that, let me start by discussing some of the comments that are here, because I feel like looking at some of these comments might actually help guide, if not, add some level of meat to the debate. So one of the first ones that I saw said, and I quote, "It's not a pandemic, it's just a ton of events. Unpopular opinion, the marriage institution is not making sense." End quote. And normally if I see something like this, I'd be like, they're probably wrong, blah, blah, blah. But I can get what they're talking about when you look at marriage on paper for a lot of people today. And this includes men. It's not just from the women's side. Even the men are also talking about how marriage is a scam, marriage doesn't benefit them, blah, blah, blah. I could get into, the further breakdown of this comment, but for the sake of time, I won't do that. Because for the most part, there's guys that are busy saying, especially for men and women in this era, it's not a good thing because you're basically getting like used pussy or some shit. But anyways, I'll leave that one aside and I'll kind of get back to the whole idea of it a little later. So another comment said, and I quote, it's not just about marriage, it's a wave of lack of commitment to anything. We are learning to leave or quit anything or anyone that doesn't meet our expectations or wants. End quote. Which, in my opinion, is very true. I feel like there's a lot more people nowadays that are either hesitant to commit or very quick to get out of a commitment if at any given point in time it doesn't suit them. Now, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I do see some positives as well as some negatives. It's helped some people avoid abuse, but it's also prevented a lot of good things that could have gotten better from actually getting better because people kind of decided to quit the moment they just saw one bad turn. Then the second to last comment says, and I quote, "You can get the benefits of marriage without being married. There is no incentive to marry anymore. You can have many children without being married through girlfriends and baby mamas. There are electronics that can do house chores such as washing machines, vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, rice cookers, and air fryers. As a single man, you get to have more sex than a married man. The good part is that you can have sex with as many women as you want. Basically, you have more freedom as a single man than as a married man." End quote. This is true for the first half, where it's like, you can get the benefits of marriage without being particularly married, which you could argue on paper does kind of seem quite true. I'd argue that, there are other benefits that you can't get if you're a single man. But when it comes down to the whole, as a single man, you get to have more sex than a married man, fam, I'm not saying that this is a path that married guys should take or that guys should take when they're married, but these guys can have quite a bit more sex than the single guys. And I say this as a single guy, knowing full well that there's a ton of babes that have given it up to married dudes because they're married as opposed to single guys. Because the way single guys basically play their math is, as far as attracting women for a lot of them, is they basically go and they try to attract a babe. If they don't attract the babe, they basically lose out and they go home without, bagging a babe that they can smash. But when it's a married dude, if the guy doesn't bag a babe out here, he doesn't really have anything to lose. He can still get pussy from his wife. So those guys, when they choose to be out there in these streets, have mad audacity, have less to lose, have a lot more financial power in a lot of cases, and can bag way more women provided they know how to play their cards right. So I would argue that this is quite categorically bullshit. So I don't particularly trust this one, but there's a lot of these, lack of incentives to get married anymore thing, which I'll probably dive into a hell of a lot more. Then to the last comment before I get into my thoughts on it, which says, and I quote, "If you dig deeper, those in their 40s were at one point in their lives married. For now, I know more men who are raising their children co-parenting than I did 10 years ago. Someone said something. Empower a woman, the first thing she will start thinking is doing away with her man. I don't need a man type shit. Empower a man and the first thing he will start thinking about is how he can start a family or help his family. That's what's happening." End quote. And I do feel like there's a shit ton of truth in this, which kind of does seem particularly interesting because I can remember back when I was a kid, there was this statement that used to go around where they were like, if you educate a boy, you are educating one individual, but if you educate a girl, you're educating an entire nation or an entire village or some shit. And considering that was the sentiments that they used to make back then, it does seem particularly odd that now we're at a point where we're like, empower a woman and she decides that she's gonna stay on her own and not be with a man. Empower a man and he's gonna wanna create a family. It's actually quite interesting. Now, am I saying that this is the truth for every empowered woman or every empowered man? No, it's not the case, but we are seeing a lot of cases like this and it does seem quite true for a lot of people. But now, with all of that said, what do I think about this? To some degree, I can understand why it is that older folk are complaining about this, but on the other end, I can get why younger folk, or at least millennials, I won't say younger folk because there's Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and shit, even Gen Betas, but I can get why millennials are also choosing to not go through with it. Because when you look at older folk, you realize that these guys have basically grown up with the idea of community in mind and at heart. So they look at it as, you know what, if I'm giving birth to a kid, they'll give birth to the next set of kids and the next set of kids. Like, they'll continue to grow the community because it's just been the natural order, quote unquote, of life. So when people start saying that they don't want to have kids or they don't want to get married and start a family, then suddenly it's like, why are you guys wrecking the natural order and causing chaos to it? Because not getting married means that the chances of having kids kind of go down quite a bit, because there's a lot of people that would not have kids, not unless if they are under the structure of a union like marriage. And when it becomes a case of, you having, different kids by different baby mamas, or just having a baby mama and, they have your kid or kids, it can create a certain level of dysfunction, which can wreck quite a big family unit very, very quickly. But for the millennial, I can see it as them seeing a stack of problems that they watched growing up, and they're like, you know what, it just doesn't seem like something that I should really get into, because a lot of the things that you'd have expected were promised with marriage aren't really what's there. Fine, yes, you can talk about how, you will get, a helper and have a bunch of kids and they'll be the best thing for you. But on one end, it's becoming more expensive to have kids now more than ever. Also, a lot of people's marriages are crumbling because they're not getting a helper. They're actually getting someone that is making their life worse in some instances. The added stress just isn't really something that they'd want. And also, you don't have to commit to a marriage to get a lot of the so-called benefits on paper that you would expect to get from a marriage. Then also there's the bit where they're busy talking about wifing hoes who fucked a bunch of guys, so you're getting used pussy. So you take all of that and it can seem like it's quite the issue. But if I was to take all of those and condense it and look at the main reasons why this is the case on both ends, so the first one that I'd probably give is there's this threat of societal instability due to a lack of structure, whereby marriage creates structure for family to kind of grow and flourish in, and not being married can wreck that structure. And I've spoken about the whole dysfunction side of it. So, if you're having multiple kids by multiple baby mamas, it's not like you're bringing them together. It's not like you're living with them as a polygamous family. It's just, which kid is with which babe. It then creates this scenario whereby there's a lot of dysfunction that can happen because there's just a lot of things that create instability in such a case. And for one, it's the lack of stability with either a singular partner or just a partner that you may be co-parenting with. So there's that. And when you wreck the family structure, considering that most communities are built around the family structure and most culture and cultural practices and laws are built around the family structure, you find that there's a lot that can be unraveled by such a thing being broken. Although granted, and this is the second reason, this could be society adapting to itself. Essentially, you look at marriage and what it's been for a lot of people. This is a union that was crafted hundreds, if not thousands of years ago by a group of people, and it's worked for them all the way to a certain point. Now, when you look at cultural marriages, they basically worked all the way till colonialism, then Christian marriages kind of had to come in. But the desires and the reasons for getting married back then, of which it was mainly family based, of which two families would come to create a stronger unit that would succeed them, was basically the reason back then. Nowadays, people aren't really thinking about that. It's just, I want to be with someone that loves me and I love them and we can have a couple of kids, yada yada yada, white picket fence. So this, and the fact that not everyone can adapt to that, could be a situation where society is adapting to today's needs, so the marriage structure or the marriage union might not be well placed or well made to actually survive it. So that is something to think about. Then also it could be the fact that people just haven't been amplifying the benefits of marriage. Because you look at it, most people will go for something even though it sucks to some degree if there's pretty good benefits attached to it. And you see this very openly whenever you look at a lot of events and things that people choose to do that just don't look all that good. you think about the idea of getting a job and working, and the fact that there's a lot of people that are working a job that they don't enjoy. They do that shit not because they enjoy it, but because there's benefits that they like. Like, I don't know, a good paycheck that can allow them to live a nicer life than what they would have had if they didn't have the job. So as a result, if we haven't amplified the benefits of marriage, then the vast chunk of people that might be seeing issues with marriage, of which there's been a shit ton of people who've lived under households that haven't had the best of marriages, would avoid a bunch of this shit. Like, a large chunk of people have probably seen marriages collapse left and right in today's day and age, and also saw bad marriages as they were growing up. So as a result of that, they're like, you know what, marriage isn't that good of an idea right now, and they choose to not get into it. So when you look at it, a bunch of these reasons do make it such that marriage just doesn't seem like an appealing option for a lot of people, because they're getting some of the benefits, they don't really see much of the use. And this is a different society to back in the day when marriage was still a pretty big thing and people kinda had to do it. So in my opinion, I feel like for the most part, the reason why a lot of guys in their 30s and 40s aren't trying to get married if they haven't been married before is we don't entirely understand why it existed. And the reason I say this is because when you look at it, marriage wasn't about enjoying shit and being in love. It was about continuing the community. And when you look at it, a lot of that kind of goes beyond a lot of the more individual desires that we have as men, and kind of stretch into what the community wants, but more so on a much more specific level, what it is the family wants and what the family can get. So when you kind of deviate from that, it does become harder for you to justify choosing to get married beyond looking at it from an individual perspective. Meaning that there's a lot of guys that are getting married either for individually driven reasons, or they just don't really see much use for it. So I can totally get why guys in their 30s and 40s can choose to not get married. So maybe, just maybe, if we re-clarified the reasons for getting married and we amplified the benefits, we might be able to reverse this trend with the last batch of the millennials and a chunk of the Gen Zs, considering that millennials after this year will all be above the age of 30. Although, to kind of conclude all of this, what I am trying to say is, for as long as Gen Xers and the first stage of millennials are still around, there'll still be this push to get married. And, people will be getting told, oh, you need to get married, oh, you need to get married. But, maybe we should just sit back and watch society adapt to it. But at the same time, if that's something that we are trying to avoid, then maybe we should start trying to amplify marriage. Maybe we should start trying to amplify these benefits and re-clarifying what it is that marriage can do for you that might actually be beneficial. Although, then again, maybe there aren't any benefits and I'm just chatting a bunch of shit. Maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe I'm right. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.